Hi guys, welcome in. We are doing the neon names. Let's begin, guys. Everybody, drop your names in the comments. Welcome to my live, guys. Everybody, get your names done, guys. All right, let's begin, guys. Everybody, drop your names in the comments. Hit that subscribe button, and let's start. All right, guys, welcome in. Let's begin, guys. Everybody, drop your names. Hi, Aubrey. There you go, Aubrey. You're the first one. Here you go, Aubrey. Who's gonna be next, guys? Welcome to my live, guys. Hit that subscribe button, like the live, and get your names done. Who's going to be the next subscriber? We're doing neon names. Hi, Taylor. There you go, Taylor. Who's the next subscriber, guys? Welcome in, everybody. Drop your names, guys. Let's begin. Thank you so much for tapping, you guys. You guys are so sweet. Thank you. And who's going to be next, guys? Everybody, welcome in. Get your neon names done. Let's go, guys. Everybody get your neon names done. Welcome to my live. Sienna in the chat. All right, Sienna, here you go. Who's going to be the next subscriber, guys? Then we got is Kiara in the chat. And then who's going to be the next subscriber, guys? Ellie in the chat. Here you go, Ellie. Your glowing name has been done. Fortune in the chat. Here you go, Fortune. Next subscriber that we have is Lexi in the chat. Here you go, Lexi. Just give me 1 second, everybody. Mia, I see you. All right, here we go. Mia in the chat. And then the next subscriber, we've got Shoaib in the chat. And then the next subscriber that we have is Romy in the chat. There you go, Romy. And then the next subscriber is Rex in the chat. And then the next subscriber is Wyatt in the chat. Who do we have next, guys? Everybody, welcome to my live. Rosie in the chat. There you go, Rosie. And then my next subscriber is Calvin in the chat. And then the next subscriber that I have is, who's going to be next, guys? Everybody hit that subscribe button and drop your names, guys. We are doing the neon glowing names. Evelyn. Here you go, Evelyn. And then the next subscriber we've got is Grayson. And then my next subscriber that we have is Freya. Thank you for liking. And then my next subscriber that we have is MTA. And then the next subscriber that we've got is Katie. And then the next subscriber that I've got is, thank you, Aubrey, for being here. Thalia. Here you go, Thalia. All right, and then the next subscriber we have is, who is that, guys? Ellis. All right, here you go, Ellis. Let's get to the next line, guys. Then we got is Judah. Thank you so much for subscribing. And then my next subscriber is Amber in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Selena in the chat. Here you go, Selena. And then my next subscriber is Noor in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Waida in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Mario in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Solace in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Andoana in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Olivia in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Abe in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Juma in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Jonathan in the chat. And then my next subscriber is William in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Dominic. How are you? So good to see you in here. Here you go. And then my next subscriber is Safa in the chat. And then the next subscriber is Phobe in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Jude in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Alea in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Yunshay in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Paydon in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Sad in the chat. Welcome back. And then my next subscriber is Julia in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Abby in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Michelle in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Leo in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Odette in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Adam in the chat. Thank you for liking. And then my next subscriber is Ronnie in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Kennedy in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Ihan in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Zaina in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Ari in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Alex in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Mixozy in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Atrin in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Millie in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Alicia in the chat. Thank you so much for liking. And then my next subscriber is Zoe in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Lily in the chat. All right, let's get to the next line. Then we have is next subscriber to be Cole in the chat. And then we have the next subscriber to be Jordan in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Remy in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Nia in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Megan in the chat. And then my next subscriber is CJ in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Ellie in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Jamia in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Sierra in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Ari in the chat. And then we have Theo in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Teddy in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Lily in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Taylor in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Alia in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Adriana in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Lava in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Dia in the chat. Let's get to the next page, everybody. And then my next subscriber is, who's that? Zara in the chat. And then my next subscriber in the chat is Ear in the chat. Here you go, Ear. And then my next subscriber is Ileana in the chat. Here you go, Ileana. And then my next subscriber is Lemantai. And then my next subscriber is Emily in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Mila in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Ariana in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Lochlan in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Devilla in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Katse in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Josia in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Hannah in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Charlie in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Noah in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Ida in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Isla in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Corban in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Shay in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Dante in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Italy in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Camilla in the chat. And then my next subscriber is LA in the chat. And then we have is Phobe in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Raquel in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Sahira in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Cora in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Layla in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Kylan in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Beatrice in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Jaden in the chat. Thank you for liking. And then my next subscriber is Carmen in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Liam in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Darcy in the chat. And then my next subscriber is LeBron in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Fatima in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Lava in the chat. And then my next subscriber is McKay in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Aaron in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Cody in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Renee in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Haru in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Zoe in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Emma in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Akira in the chat. Thank you for liking. And then my next subscriber is Hannah in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Cruz in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Ava in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Emily in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Bianca in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Isa in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Savannah in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Chloe in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Taha in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Presley in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Charlie in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Manpreet in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Olivia in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Josh in the chat. Thank you for liking. And then my next subscriber is Jenny in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Malik in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Jasek in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Riley in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Narden in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Harper in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Levi in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Lando in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Korosh in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Izan in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Ayla in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Jenny in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Sophie in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Rocco in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Portia in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Diana in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Tracy in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Zachary in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Scott in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Harmony in the chat. And then my next subscriber is May May in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Maya in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Jerry in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Tanjiro in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Ade in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Jay in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Anna in the chat. All right, let's get to the next page, everybody. All right, and then the next subscriber that I have is Lucas in the chat. And then the next subscriber that I have is Anna. And then my next subscriber is Nia in the chat. And then the next subscriber we've got is Elon in the chat. And then the next subscriber we've got is Viola in the chat. And then the next subscriber we've got is Kyra in the chat. And then the next subscriber that we have is Yabiko. And then the next subscriber that we've got is Zane. And then the next subscriber we've got is Darcy. And then the next subscriber we've got is Lucia. And then the next subscriber we've got is Croxley. All right, then we've got is Croxley. Is that Croxley? Here you go. And then the next subscriber we've got is Jack in the chat. And then my next subscriber is Liliana in the chat. And then the next subscriber we've got is Ethan in the chat. And then the next subscriber we've got is Clay in the chat. And then the next subscriber we've got is Laderica. And then the next subscriber that we have is Zari in the chat. And then the next subscriber we've got is Ona in the chat. And then the next subscriber we've got is Viola in the chat. And then the next subscriber we've got is Maria in the chat. And then the next subscriber that I have is Kai in the chat. And then the next subscriber that we've got is Lara in the chat. And then the next subscriber we've got is Beautiful in the chat. And then my next subscriber that I have is Evelyn in the chat. And then the next subscriber that we've got is Presley. And then my next subscriber is Illis. And then my next subscriber is Maggie. And then my next subscriber is Caleb. And then my next subscriber is Zahra. And then my next subscriber is Amal. And then my next subscriber is Mira. That's my name too. And then my next subscriber is Ethan. And then my next subscriber is Alia. And then my next subscriber is Habib. And then my next subscriber is Sophie. And then my next subscriber is Jack. And then my next subscriber is Hannah. And then my next subscriber is Eva. And then my next subscriber is Max. And then my next subscriber is Miko. And then my next subscriber is Mariam. And then my next subscriber is Yusuf. And then my next subscriber is Reem. And then my next subscriber is Madhavi. And then my next subscriber is Rebecca. And then my next subscriber is Bryson. And then my next subscriber is Ihan. And then my next subscriber is Wesley. And then my next subscriber is Nyla. And then my next subscriber is Delilah. And then my next subscriber is Harlan. And then my next subscriber is Manon. And then the next subscriber is Jaslyn. And then my next subscriber is Shama. And then the next subscriber is Sahir. And then the next subscriber is Yari. And then the next subscriber is Olivia. And then the next subscriber is Afia. And then my next subscriber is Patrick. And then my next subscriber is Brianna. And then my next subscriber is Arhan. And then my next subscriber is Peter. And then my next subscriber is Akira. And then my next subscriber is Nisa. And then my next subscriber is Isaac. And then my next subscriber is Aya. Thank you for liking. And then my next subscriber is Emily. And then my next subscriber is Bonnie. Thank you for liking. And then my next subscriber is Nalady. And then my next subscriber is Patrick. And then my next subscriber is Elliot. Thank you for liking. And then my next subscriber is Beatrice. And then my next subscriber is Alana. And then my next subscriber is Violet. And then my next subscriber is Ohema. And then my next subscriber is Neha. And then my next subscriber is Dustin. Alright guys, I will go for a break and I'll be back in like half an hour. Take care of yourself. I love you all.